All right, welcome back to Howell Woodwork. My name is Griffin, and in this video we're going to do a little bit of a shop tour of my massive 13 by 19 wood shop. Sarcasm, obviously. So let's take a look around. All right, starting off with the miter saw station. This is probably my newest big tool of the shop, and it is the Bosch 12-inch glide miter saw. I'll put the actual name up on the screen. Before this, I had a DeWalt 12-inch compound miter saw, but it wasn't the slide, it was just the chop. If you're familiar with compound sliding miter saws, then you know it is common to have a rail system that protrudes almost up to a foot behind the saw, because that's the extra travel that you would get coming forward. But the great thing about this Bosch glide saw is that it is on its own articulating arm that allows it to be close to the wall and pretty much just eliminate how much space is taking up in your shop. And when you have a 13 by 19 wood shop, space is clearly an issue, and you have to consider things like that. Moving on from the saw itself, miter saw station was probably the second thing I ever built in this wood shop, aside from my workbench in the middle. Admittedly did it in a little bit of a hurry, so it's got stick 2x4 framing. And I went with the John Peters style miter saw bench. It was the one that I saw online at the time when I was wanting to make one, and it kind of offered a more simple solution to get the cutting surface up to the same level as the saw itself. And obviously that just involved cutting a series of spacer blocks all the same height. And in doing so, it kind of allowed me to have some little storage cubbies. I thought about doing drawer pullouts for a while, but honestly, it's just so nice to be able to reach in here, grab what I need. They get a little bit filled up with dust, but I mean, at the same time, it's a wood shop and things are going to get covered in dust. After that, I also just kind of used the space behind this fence for storage. At the time it was tool storage, and now it is scrap cut-off storage, your typical pine and plywood over here and hardwood for the most part over on the right hand side. Moving on from there, the most recent thing I've done for the miter saw station, aside from upgrading the miter saw itself, was inlaying tape from both sides. So we've got left to right reading tape and then right to left reading tape on their respective sides. And then I installed a T-track again on the right and on the left side, so that I can have a movable stop. And of course my stop lines up with the tape measure relatively easy. I tightened it down, and you've got a nice secure 2 points, and I'm kind of liking this one. The plus side is that I can remove this front knob and be able to reach it across onto the actual saw. And that's why it has this given length. If there's anything that I need to cut that's smaller than that, I don't need to be doing it on the miter saw to begin with, because I like my fingers where they are. All right, again, storage on both sides and down below. So my far left, closest to the table saw, you'll notice is my sled storage, table saw sled storage. I've honestly got a kind of unused bay down there, and that's kind of a rarity, so I'm leaving that as is until something finds a home down there, I'm sure. If I ever need tools on the go, I've got my portable tool chest down there. It's got wheels. It doesn't get used very often, let's be honest. And then down here is my finishes, rags, brushes, yeah. Pretty much anything that has to do with finishing is on this far right hand side. That is pretty much the miter saw station in a nutshell. Like I mentioned earlier, To the left of my saw is a bunch of scrap, mostly pine and plywood. And just above that, it's really just a convenience shelf is what I'm gonna refer to it as. I used to have a poster on the wall right there, and realized pretty quickly that I needed the space for something else. I do 90% of my work right here at the workbench, so it's really nice to be able to turn around and grab the things that I use most frequently, really. These aren't my go-to impact driver and drill, but they used to be, so it's my Porter cable. I keep those up there just in case my actual go-to Milwaukees aren't right in reach. It's always nice to have an extra set. We've got anything from spare clamps to sandpaper, adhesives, again, extra clamps, and then I just have these hooks right on there, and it makes it really easy to be able to grab something that you need, and then when you're done using it, it doesn't end up on a horizontal surface and in the way. Instead, I can quickly hang it up and get it out of the way. And then on top, I have my Craig jig on a mounted plate. It doesn't get used a ton, but when it does, it's super convenient to have the extensions on it and be able to have it right up and in reach, and then when I'm done, it goes right back up and it's out of the way. All right, and as we come down to the far left end of my miter saw station, I've got a little drilling setup over here, all centered around this General International benchtop drill press. It gets the job done. What else can I say? Behind the drill press, you'll notice I just have a series of magnetic tool holders. Honestly, that was the best way for me to be able to quickly see at a glance all of my drill bits, whether it be metal, brad point, Forstner bit, you name it. They're all right there, and super easy to just grab and stick right back on when you're done. The only other thing is I added a slightly wider tabletop to the drill press. This gives me more working area, more clamping area for jigs, etc. Also makes it a little bit of a sacrificial surface, but I always try to grab a piece of scrap wood and use that. All right, you'll have to forgive the close quarters. Again, very small shop, and if I were to open up the garage door right now, everything would get blown out for video, and we don't want that. But here is my homemade dust collection system, powered by a pretty standard shop vac. It was one of the first things that I bought when I moved into this house. I knew I needed some type of dust collection. At first it was a movable cart that I could roll around to whatever station I was working on at the time, directly based off of Jay Bates' dust collection cart that he made a number of years ago. It has since become a standalone dust collection system. It never moves from right there, and that is because I have it hooked up through the Cyclone and up through a series of grounded PVC. It originally had a bucket that had the Cyclone hooked up on top of it, and it was easy to unclip the lid of the bucket and empty that. But over time, the plastic started to give way and started to crack, and I realized that I needed to make a new solution for my dust collection. And this is it, just a simple box with a plexiglass window so you can see how much dust is filling in there, but I will say the suction is so much better with this box than it was with the old bucket. And then down here I have a pretty simple little twist off, and that loosens up a thread so that this bottom can slide out. That allows me to bring a bag right up next to it and be able to have the dust empty out much easier than it was before, and not to mention capacity is probably tripled if not quadrupled than the bucket. Still use the same Cyclone, some flex pipe, and that gets it going. Branches off into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different blast gates, and I'll show you those now. As it leaves the dust collector, it first branches off and has a blast gate for the table saw, and that runs down onto the floor and then up into the table saw, which I'll show a little bit later. After that, we continue, and again, going up through another blast gate, and this sends it over to the other side, up across the ceiling and down over onto the other side of the shop. Up means that it's closed, and down means that air is able to pass. If I want to use the table saw dust collection, this one needs to be in the closed position, and there's another one for the miter saw hidden way back here. The miter saw doesn't get used very often, so that tends to stay in the closed position, and if I do open it, it's always the one that I forget to close again. So if I have a loss of suction, chances are the miter saw is the culprit. You'll also notice that there are no 90-degree turns anywhere in the dust collection system. It is all 45 flowing in the direction that the suction will be coming from. And that just cuts down on any drag and helps improve the dust collection as it makes its way all the way over to the other side of the shop. All right, and before I take you over to the other side of the shop, I did want to backtrack a little bit and talk about the first of 3 lumber storage racks inside the shop. This was the first set that I made completely out of wood. I had a need for storage, as we all do, and decided to make them out of plywood and ripped down 2x4s. But nothing too crazy. There's 10 racks. They're all matched up 16 on center with the studs behind them on the wall, so obviously they won't come crashing down on my head. But yeah, they right now they're holding some chunks of cherry, white oak, and then above that, you'll see a lot of this around the shop, is some tongue and groove white oak hardwood flooring that I was also able to get at an auction. What I will use it for, we'll find out. Okay, we rounded the corner and passed the main garage door, and that puts us right next to my 1957 Mark V Shopsmith. I was able to get this from my stepfather's brother, who bought it years ago and didn't have a use for it, so he figured why not ask me about it, and here it is. If you're familiar with these old Shopsmiths, you know that they can be a drill press, a table saw, a lathe, a disc sander, and more. The main reason I wanted it was for the lathe and for the disc sander over here on the side. Like most woodworkers, you're either using a lathe every single day or you use it maybe once or twice a year. But when you need it, it's obviously the only tool for the job. And up here above it, I just made a quick tool holder for the gouges and tool rests, you name it. And then down below, like I mentioned earlier, more tongue and groove white oak flooring. And without going anywhere, we're just simply going to pan up and you'll see the second of my 3 lumber racks here in the shop. You'll also notice that I opted to just go with the metal lumber racks over here and not take the time to make them all myself. But it was absolutely a need here in the shop. You'll also notice that every one of my lumber racks are going to be at least above shoulder high, allowing for tools and other things to live underneath of them. It's just been the best way, instead of having one dedicated wall for lumber, just kind of scattering them up high throughout the shop. But yeah, you'll notice we've got some pretty hefty white oak, some smaller 5/4 white oak, and then some 5/4 walnut up top as well, with other various woods, plywoods, flooring, etc. scattered in between. But yeah, let's keep moving on. And as we pass by the Shopsmith, you'll notice a small and simple charging station for all the different types of batteries that I use with my cordless tools inside the shop. Immediately to the left of that is the home for both my Grizzly oscillating belt and spindle sander, and then down below my Pancake air compressor, which honestly hasn't been used in a while now that I have some cordless nailing tools, but we'll get to that in a minute. Above both of those, you'll notice some more black flexible pipe, which leads up to another blast gate that I mentioned earlier, and that is dedicated just for this hose, which can reach the spindle sander, the disc sander, and also the planer, which we will get to a little later. Moving right along to my 14-inch Grizzly bandsaw with their 6-inch riser block kit, which gives you that extra resaw capacity so that you can resaw those slightly wider boards, which is honestly what I use my bandsaw for most of the time anyway, and is also why you almost always see a 1/2-inch blade in my bandsaw. Although I do have a 3/16 inch blade for when I need to make curved cuts as well. With that, you'll also notice that it shares the same dust collection port and flexible black hose as my planer, disc sander, and oscillating spindle sander. Clicks right down here into the bottom and you're ready to cut. I won't spend too much time on this next section, but as you can see, I have an exterior door here, and being in a small shop, you have to be able to maximize all the space you can, and not to mention being able to block out a window so that I can control the lighting in here for videos. Don't worry, I understand that my planes are sitting on a door. The door doesn't get open very often, but when it does, rest assured, I know that they're there. As you see here, I've got a few of my Wood River planes, router planes, rasps, files, card scrapers, draw knife, and some extra combination gauges. And over to my right is my most used hand tools. You'll notice a theme here. Obviously not sponsored by Milwaukee, but Milwaukee, let me know. I really hope you don't hear my neighbor starting to mow his grass in this audio, but we'll keep going just in case. Pliers, snips, and assorted screwdrivers. Some not as nice chisels that I can use for other stuff. Scissors, sockets. It's always good to have a woodpecker's precision square so you can check all your other squares. Just only one has to be perfect. And then up here above it, a hacksaw that you probably can't see in frame. No, you cannot. And coping saw. All right, now that we've almost come full circle around the perimeter of my shop, it brings us to my, I guess, hand power tool slash desk area. I was really fortunate. I had a old boss that had these lockers and wanted to get rid of them, so I said absolutely, because they are the perfect size for hand power tools like I mentioned. Jigsaws, circular saws, air tools, corded drills, routers, obviously all labeled so I can quickly see what's in there. And then right above, you'll notice this is the third of the 3 lumber racks that I mentioned in the shop. This one is fully dedicated to that white oak flooring that I mentioned earlier. What it will be used for, we'll find out in time. And yeah, so this desk was actually one of the first videos I ever did, and I'll pop up a little bit of it on screen here. Recorded it all with a GoPro, but made it to fit perfectly between this span of lockers, and then mounted it to the wall as well. Laptop to control the X-Carve CNC, which I'll get to in a minute. And then just a collection of screws and hardware, washers, you name it, live there. And then for right now, I've almost got a second hand tool wall with my hammers, razor saws, and some other measuring and marking tools. And then for when it gets really, really hot here in Virginia Beach summer months, it's nice to have a big fan to move some air around. But yeah, let's move to the middle of the shop before I talk about what's over here, because I have a feeling that's going to be everybody's favorite part. And like I briefly mentioned, this is my X-Carve CNC. It is the 75 by 75 centimeter, which is almost exactly 29.5 by 29.5 inches, which is really useful for most of the stuff that I do in the shop. I've only ran into a couple situations where I needed one that was bigger, and I was able to break it up into different pieces and have it still work for me, as well as a couple of push blocks here for my benchtop Rikon jointer. It pretty much lives here in this spot, screwed down to the workbench, but I'm able to remove it if I ever need to pass bigger sheets of plywood through the table saw or anything like that. Here in the middle is something that probably looks a little familiar, and that is the Polk style workbench. A combination of him and Jay Bates' version. This was the first thing that I built when I moved into this house. Not only a workbench, but then an outfeed table for my table saw. And I loved the Polk style because it allows you to put stuff underneath and not have hand tools scattered out over top of the work surface and getting in the way. So I have some pretty commonly used stuff in those cubbies. As well as I eventually ended up adding these dog holes so that I can easily clamp stuff down. Yeah, it's seen some wear and tear over the years, and I've always kind of joked that if the tabletop ever gets too beat up to use anymore, I feel like I would have to use it as an art piece or something like that on the wall. Just a lot of memories. I can tell you pretty much just about where every one of those marks came from and which project it came from. Moving right along, like I mentioned, here is my Rikon benchtop joiner. It's 6-inch, not ideal. I do like that it has the helical cutter head and just gets a cleaner finish, but it's limited in size and what I can put on it. Obviously a bigger in-feed and out-feed table with maybe 8 to 10 inches would be ideal, but not in this wood shop. So I forgot to mention it when I was first talking about the workbench, but I do have a dedicated dust collection hose that comes down over top of the workbench, and that is mainly used by my only Festool tool in the shop. They call it the gateway tool, but I'm so far have just gotten their ETS 125 orbital sander. I love it. I love the variable speed, and then obviously having the dust collection helps a ton keep those fine particles out of the air. But the one thing I haven't talked about is my 12-inch DeWalt planer. Again, like the joiner, bigger would be better, but for what I need and for the size of my shop, it gets me by for sure. Is a little bit of a dance trying to get things through it by myself and actually watch out for the dust collection hose as well. But like I said, it gets by, and it sits on top of a rolling cart with some random junk filled inside of it. But it being on wheels, again, like the jointer, allows me to move it out of the way if I ever need to feed some larger sheet goods through my table saw and onto the workbench. Which is, again, just a necessity in a small shop like this. But let's move on to the table saw and the router table. Again, you'll have to forgive the tight quarters, but we'll close off the center of my shop with the router table and table saw. Table saw, without a doubt, the most important tool in any shop, or at least the most used tool in any shop. But that being said, it's also the most dangerous tool in the shop. Anytime you have a blade just sticking up out of a surface, accidents are bound to happen. And that's why it was a no-brainer for me from day one. When I knew I'd be turning this garage into a shop, I saved up all my money to get the 10-inch contractor saw from SawStop. You'll notice I've added the 2 cast iron extension wings, but again, having that extra little peace of mind that if for whatever reason accidents do happen, If it does, I've got that added sense of security that if I were to bump this blade in any manner, it's just going to destroy the blade and destroy the brake, as opposed to chopping off a finger, which is always good. If you've watched any woodworking channels on YouTube, chances are you know all about saw stop and why this table saw is not only a great option for the safety feature, but also to just get accurate and repeatable cuts. Even the contractor model I've found is top of the line, but again, adding these extra cast iron wings definitely helps add some weight to the saw, so you cut down on vibrations, and I haven't had any issues with that in 6-7 years of using this saw. I did go ahead and get the extension so I can come all the way out to 3 feet or 36 inches. And in doing that, it allowed me to put a router table in the extension wing. At first it was just a simple upside down router mounted to some plexiglass and placed here in the extension wing. I have since upgraded it to the Craig plate with a Bosch, I forget which model it is, router underneath, and having that Craig router lift just makes things a whole lot easier, as well as this added little shelf, which is really convenient for me to be able to get to different plates, tools, and then obviously the on-off switches. But that being said, let's finish off the shop with the part I think everybody likes to see, and that is my clamp rack. And last but definitely not least is my clamp rack. I think I counted somewhere around 120 to 140 clamps, lost count quite a few times. But like they say, you can never have enough. Anything from parallel clamps to F-style clamps to spring clamps, dovetail clamps, you name it, it's here, and they all get used. I can't tell you how many times I've had several projects go together at the same time, and I think there's no way I could possibly run out of clamps, and then I look over here and this rack is completely empty. So case in point, you can never have enough clamps. All it is a sheet of 1/2-inch plywood mounted to the wall, and I just, as I've gone along, I've added these plywood mounts. It's always easy to know exactly where to put them back. They all have their own homes, including the bandy clamps up in the corner, all the way down to the pipe clamps and more. With that being said, that concludes my 2022 shop tour. I'm sure there'll be more in the future and hopefully in a bigger shop, but only time will tell. Thanks for watching. I hope you stuck around till the end. If you have any questions about anything, just drop them in the comments below and I'll do my best to try to read all of them and answer any questions. Like I said, I didn't want to go into insane detail about every single tool, but I'd be more than happy to answer those in the comments below. Insert catchy phrase that I haven't come up with yet. Thanks for watching.